There we go. Keith, how are you?
I'm all good.
Excellent. Thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It was a lovely little message that I got from you. Tiny little words with a lot of sentiment. No problem, Leon, when I asked you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm going to try and not make it too awkward because I know you've never read the course. Please don't worry. I'm going to walk you through it very slowly.
Be gentle with me. Be gentle with me.
And I guess Siri's fed up of hearing you ask, what does A Course in Miracles say about? But yeah, it was a real joy for me to discover you and your community. And in a sense, it was interesting because it came to me in two waves. So I've got a really lovely collection of friends in Holland that I made in the mid-90s from touring and playing concerts, and we've stayed in touch ever since, to the point where he was even like a witness at our wedding. He's really, really lovely people and really close friends. And one day I made a post of, I think it was just like my hand above one of the lessons, and took a photograph of the book open. And then I got a private message from him, the same photograph in Dutch. And I was like, oh my God, you guys are course students. No idea, it's only been for a few years for them, but I thought, goodness me, I would have had my book with me when I went out there every time I met them. And all these years later, the illusory intervals of linear time turns out all along we've been in the same boat. So she'd sent me some of your work, like some of the Zoom meetings from YouTube. And is there somebody in the community who translates to Dutch? I seem to recall seeing a comment once.
Yeah, no, there's actually, YouTube have a new auto translate feature. Now you have to enable it yourself, but it will basically translate any language into your language on YouTube.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's not always perfect, but it does the job.
So she sent me some of your stuff and I was like, okay. And I watched a bit of it and I engaged with it. But what really connected for me was the Miracle Voices episode you did.
Okay.
To the point where I probably listened to that 3 or 4 times now. And at the time, I'd gone from like a very solitary experience with the course for probably like 27 years, just me and the course. I met about 3 or 4 people who had a copy. And then it occurred to me to Google A Course in Miracles during lockdown. And oh, blimey, somebody else has heard of it and someone else. And there's all this stuff out there. So initially that was obviously really joyous and like, wow, and it's led to some great connections. But equally, there was a couple of experiences where I found that joining like a Facebook group, it became like a negative experience. And I was like, I ended up retreating from this group because they all were like just so anti-Ken, and I was shocked by it. And I left them with a parting message. I did a post which said, what's all encompassing can have no Wapnick. And just left that and thought, there you go, you can all chew the fat on that one. And I just left the group, and for a while I was like, God, okay, back to, maybe this is a solitary thing. And then during your Miracle Voices, when, you described the terms to join the group of like, listen, I'm not going to be officiating any altercations about this. We're just on side with Ken. I was like, oh, great, safe space. And it's really safe space, isn't it? There's like nobody gets anything other than support from one another in your group. It's really lovely.
Yeah, when I started teaching the course, I sort of did it kicking and screaming and reluctantly. And when I did start the group, from the very beginning, I went, I'm not officiating over different factions hating each other and trying to be right. So I says, if I'm, and it was only I was originally maybe 35 people that asked me, please, can you do some Zoom meetings or just help us to get the hang of the course the way Ken taught it? And when I agreed to it, it was, yeah, it's like, well, I'm going to teach the course the way Ken teaches it. So you're welcome. Anyone is welcome in the group, but you can't come in and throw rotten fruit at it just because you want to believe something different. You come, you listen, you either agree with it or you don't, but you don't get to be here throwing rotten fruit at it. So that was from the very start. And from the very start, we said, this is a course group. We're going to treat each other with respect. I'm going to treat everyone here with respect, and you're going to treat each other and me with respect. And everyone has done it, and everyone just comments on it when they come into the group, how refreshing it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a shared reality, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, what we have to understand, I mean, the course is written on so many levels, and I mean, in some ways it's genius, and in some ways it would like drive you to drink. But Jesus has pretty much pitched the course to every rung of the ladder. So originally there was parts where he said to Helen, God made the world, and it's like this place where you can learn. And then he goes on to say there's no world, like that's the central lesson the course intends to teach. But some people may need to hear that on a rung of the ladder. And in the same way, people argue over, is the course non-duality, is the course duality? And you couldn't possibly read the course and say anything other than the fact that Jesus taught it both ways. He's not proud, he's not fussy. It's like, well, if you're ready to go the non-duality route, that's in the course, and if you're not, you can like look at these other parts, where it says God made beings. Do you know what I mean? And so, you couldn't read the course and not say Jesus is, speaking out of both sides of his mouth. And all he wants to do is get you on the rung of the ladder. And I mean, he pretty much tells us in the course, especially, I can't remember which lesson it is, where he says, forget this course. The whole course is a bunch of concepts, and Jesus says, salvation is nothing more than from concepts. So all he wants to do with the course, I mean, even in the clarification of terms, the opening paragraph is funny because he says, I've no interest in precise terminology. And, what he's pretty much saying is, look, I've written what I've written, and it's enough to bring you to the universal experience. Which is an experience outside of concepts. And so he's not fussy whether you want to see it as duality or non-duality in the beginning. He'll meet you where you're at, and he'll bring you, he'll bring everyone to the same place, which is a place outside of concepts. And that's all he cares about. But that's why Ken always said that you have to read the course like a great poem. If you start taking things literally, or you start reading things in isolation outside of the greater metaphysics of the course, then you're going to end up like mad, madder than we already are. And so, there's huge Ken hate on the internet, but you must understand that if you are invested in a dualistic understanding of the course, you sort of have to hate Ken. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, because if he's right, you're wrong. So it's like, it's very important that Ken be wrong in order that you're not wrong. Yeah, So yeah, that's what's going on. So again, our job is forgiveness,
Absolutely. And I think, because Jesus is outside of the dream, it's like, mm-hmm. I was thinking recently, sort of doing a bit of writing, and you want someone outside of the dream to tell you that you're dreaming, don't you? Because otherwise someone inside the dream, their understanding is as limited as yours. And
absolutely.
By being outside of the dream, then we are now having an opportunity to tap into the greater knowledge. We know that God's will doesn't oppose. He knows that better than we do. We know it in theory. He knows it as knowledge. And that's why we hear him say, if you're ready, I'm here. If you're not, I'll wait. Which really makes me laugh. It's just casual. It's like, listen, if you're ready, I'm here. If you're not, I'll wait.
Absolutely.
And the separation hasn't occurred, the journey without distance. So yeah, he's almost got his feet up. I don't know if he's got sandals on up there, but he's certainly got his So speaking of the metaphysics, I know we both went to the dentist last week, and I can certainly confirm that in my rural village where I had my appointment, I guarantee that no one sat in that chair and ever said, I'm not a body, I'm free, as many times as I did during that procedure. And you know, nothing real is threatened, nothing unreal exists. And it was like, oh my God. Oh. And although
It's
there's
funny. It's funny. I exactly the same when I'm in the dentist chair. It's the same every single time I'm practicing. It's like, you know, I am the awareness of discomfort, but you know, but
yeah,
what does it have to do with what I am as the awareness of it? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, because I found myself thinking, should I try and position my awareness somewhere outside of this chair? And it was like, well, no, I need to be aware of what's happening in this chair from outside of this. Oh, whatever. So although there's humor obviously in that, equally recently I went to a funeral, and it was for like somebody who's so close to me that, you know, the idea of different surnames is like thrown away, because these people are like my family, and this
Okay.
guy's like my brother, and his mum passed and he couldn't get up. I'm professionally trained celebrant, so you know, it's in my
Okay.
repertoire, and as a musician, to stand up in front of a crowd of people and talk to a microphone, you know, I can do that. And he asked me to speak on behalf of him because he knew he would stumble on his first sentence.
Of course.
Obviously I did that for him as a great honor, and I did it for her and the whole family and all of our shared friends. And in the build up to these things, whether it's speaking in that context or whether it's performing as a musician, I don't tend. I can hear my brain going, "Oh, I wonder if you're going to get nervous." Oh, and then the time between going on stage or the event happening gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And next thing you know, I'm there, and it's like, no, I didn't. You know, it's just thanks for checking in, but it's fine. You know. And then in the context of speaking at the funeral, I kept it together. There's a couple of wobbly moments because there's, you know, it's like doing a job, but there's so much emotional investment in the task.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a time and place for the metaphysics, and you're in a room full of heartbroken people who might not actually have much faith, or it might not be on their radar at the moment or in general. And you know, the thought of speaking about anything that we would use in our sort of common vocabulary was like, no, this is not the time and place for that. This is just to be with these people, know it in your mind on behalf of yourself and on behalf of them and our shared identity,
Correct. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
let this be.
Yeah. It's really about being in touch with the peace in your own mind and holding that space, which, you know, yeah, and you do it for everyone. It's like when Jesus says, I rest in God, you know, and you pull people into your peace. And that's a real task. People get hung up on what should I say, what should I do? That's secondary, you know. Again, that's sort of, see, as Jesus says in the Song of Prayer, that's really, you know, looking for the echo without hearing the song. You know, there's no echo without the song, and the song is the peace in your mind. And so, you know, for us, it's really applying the principle, you know, the miracle that says, you know, the miracle looks on devastation and reminds the mind that what it sees is false. And so it's about us connecting with the me that's not a body, or an insane voice talking to itself. It's me having that presence in my mind that we call the Holy Spirit. And that's enough, you know. And then to extend the Holy Spirit, that what I am, my brother is, and my sister is, no matter whether there's a body appears to be here or there's not there. What I am is what everyone is. That's the extension of the Holy Spirit. And then what you say is incidental after that.
Beautiful. Yeah, he made me think of like a Rumi phrase where he says, there's a voice that uses silence, listen, something, paraphrase that kind of thing.
Yeah. When someone's holding that presence in front of you, you can't not be affected by it.
Yeah, it was really powerful. You know, a room full of people that I've loved for half my life, all absolutely devastated. It's like, whew, this is powerful. So In terms of your daily study and your meditations, do you have an approach that you are flexible with, or do you have a similar practice each day? How do you deal with the course on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. I guess when I really went at it seriously, I would listen to Ken Wapnick lectures for like maybe 3-4 hours a day.
Hmm.
Because I would, you know, play it whilst commuting. I would play it in the gym. I would play it every chance I had. And that was because I just needed that reinforcement in the very beginning, because I had that generalized anxiety disorder. Um, and that was so helpful. And now I love that. I mean, there was a time I used to binge Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all these things, and now that's gone out the window, because any chance I get, I will be listening to maybe the course, or I will be listening to Kenneth lectures, or other authors or teachers on the course around non-duality of any kind. So I just love to immerse myself in that now, because it keeps me on track.
Hmm.
And then, of course, everything that happens is your lesson in your classroom for the day. So each time I get upset, it's like, there you go. You were identifying as the insane voice talking to yourself in your mind. So of course you're upset. So let's go back to the stately calm. Let's go back and join the Holy Spirit above the battleground. So that's really my daily practice. I guess more recently, over the last year, the group has taken over a lot of my time. So there's less time listening to other like audiobooks and Ken lectures, and there's a lot more time spent answering questions in the group. But again, that enriches me more than it enriches anyone, because what we teach, we learn.
Yeah.
And ideas shared are increased and strengthened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I recognize the experience of almost like the soliloquy, really, of I was asked to do an article about the course. So without going into it too much, as a musician, I've always used my course understanding to inform my lyrics. But because outside of a course community or a spiritual community, the percentage of people who are going to be open to these ideas is quite low. So I've found a way of writing about love in a multi-interpretable kind of way, so someone doesn't know that I'm singing about my
Very cool.
relationship, with God, or with Jesus, or with you, or with my wife, or with Dash, or whoever it might be, so that people can then get the message. So it's like speaking to their mind without them knowing it, which obviously we know about from the course. And then I was asked to do an article for an online magazine, and it was the first time that I'd been presented in my own perception. I was like, oh, hold on a minute, I could do this, because I'm just so used to it being almost cloak and dagger, that I thought, yeah, okay, step into the open and put my name to it and do this, and for me, kind of like exactly how you've just described it, it was then really good for me, because I get to see my understanding in front of me on a piece of paper, and I enjoyed looking it out. I enjoyed thinking, right, what key points from a course do I want to say? This is an introduction, so some people are going to need to know about the Helen and Bill side of things, all the way down to like sin, guilt, fear, salvation, relationships, and I don't think I've ever seen one of your comments in the group that isn't like about 18 paragraphs long and covers every single base. You never shortchange anybody on what they ask you. It's really beautiful. It's amazing. And thanks for that. And also I feel like saying thank you for all that time that you spent relatively like on your own before you discovered this, when you did have the anxiety, and when you talk about the obesity problems and things like that. So I would like to say thank you for that journey that you've taken to get you to this place where you can offer so much to us all.
Oh, thanks, Leon. And I've learned to be very grateful for that as well.
Mm.
I think it was an integral, indispensable part of the journey.
Yeah, we learn these things so that we can help other people. You know, it's no different to the traumas that I've experienced in childhood. One of the things about people that I really love is once we've cleared the trauma, it's almost like the very next thing that occurs to people is, right, how can I help someone else with this? You know,
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, absolutely.
it's all the way down to like a cellular level. It's like, you know, ancient ancestors went out on the hunt, brought back enough food for themselves and then to share with their clans people, and
Sure.
they get a dopamine hit in their brain from sharing their food, you know, and that
Yeah.
200,000 years ago to today, where we have all of the different complexities of the legion of egos, you know, it seems to be this beautiful unifying motivation. Clear the trauma. Right, where was I? Right back at the beginning. What's my frequency of energy before all this distortion knocked me off track? What's
Indeed.
my individuality? What can I bring to the table? How can I help? How can I
Yeah.
serve? And in fact, in reference to me asking you how you start your day, so say with my morning meditation, I like to set my intention. And that's a Wayne Dyer thing that I've chucked in there of like, how can I serve? You know, you say it like 1,000 times. How can I serve? How can I serve?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really beautiful quality that people have. It's like, we just want to walk each other home, don't we? As soon as we suss that
Absolutely.
out. And all of the pain comes from denying that and not
Yeah.
realizing that and trying to be separate and not seeing that your salvation lies in other people.
Absolutely.
And interesting that you were talking about the concepts and salvation itself being the escape from concepts, because that helps to sort of frame it as a temporary learning device from Jesus, doesn't it? To say, look, here's a concept to get your head around. Once you've got your head around the concept, bin it.
Yeah, it's a big book of concepts about how to let go of concepts forever and then forget about the concepts. That's exactly what it is. I
Forget
often say
this concept.
yeah, I often say it's a big book of lies, but they're useful lies. They tell you how to use concepts to get rid of concepts, and then there's no more concepts and no more cause.
Speaking of big books, where did you get that one that you sit behind when you're doing the Zoom meetings? It's huge, isn't it?
I think I found it from a foundation resource somewhere. Yeah.
I was thinking, is that his duvet cover? You know, of course, the cover of the Course in Miracles. Is that devoted? So yeah, I would like you to talk to us about so the sort of go-to lessons that we know from coming at the course from Ken's perspective. We've got our lesson 5, lesson 34, lesson 132. They're the big hitters. You know, we've heard him say, if you only had 2 or 3 lessons, these are the ones that are going to
Yeah.
get you forwards, or you return as you move forwards, or you move forwards as you return, because that's another thing with the course, isn't it? There's so much paradox in there, which is
Sure.
interesting. So I was going to ask you where your thinking went to if we put those 3 lessons to one side and maybe looked at the principle of lesson 336 being forgiveness lets me know that minds are joined. And in a sense, the question, we know that I often explain to people, say like with the workbook, I think, you know, we're standing in a museum, we're looking at a statue, and we're looking at the statue from 365 positions around the statue each day, but it's the same statue, and we look at it
Yes.
365 points. And really, the reason for just going round and round and round is because some of us might not get any of those. You know, we all need our own way of seeing it. And another thing that I like about some of my favorite teachers is they put so much emphasis on that first 50, first 20 lessons. And when you whittle it right down and you think about the very first lesson, nothing I see means anything. And it's like, what that takes for you know, I know people who, if I'd said that to them, not what me, nothing I see means, how dare you, you know. So
Yeah.
the power of that to deconstruct this investment in the glorious separate self is incredible. So yeah, I just wonder where your thinking goes with that, Keith. That'd be amazing to hear.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about the first lesson, nothing I see means anything. I think it takes a long time for us to realize that that is a definitive statement. There are no exceptions. Your body doesn't mean anything. Your past doesn't mean anything. The people around you don't mean anything. The world doesn't mean anything. Literally, that's what that is saying. It doesn't mean anything. And so I think metaphysically, you know, when we as the one split mind made the world in order to escape from what we thought was God coming for us in our minds to undo our separateness. Once we made the world as an attack on God, it was meant to be a place where he could enter not. But so the intention was unholy. But once we made the world, now it's neutral. It doesn't mean anything because it's a movie. It's a dream. A dream doesn't mean anything. They're just made up images. And that's really what's being said in that first miracle principle. It's saying, listen, it's a movie. Like it literally, none of it means anything. You know, Jesus says in the Course, if you could just accept that the world doesn't mean anything and, you know, allow a meaning to be written on it for you, you would be incredibly happy. That's what Jesus says. And, you know, the meaning that's written on it for us is forgiveness. And so the only purpose anything has, anything, like look around you, anything, the only purpose it has is so you learn how to not make it real. So as long as we are identifying as a separate self, we give it a meaning. We're like, well, this is good and this is bad, and you know, this is evil and this is holy and this is unholy, and there's holy people and there's unholy people, and there's you know, there's atrocities and they're awful and they're sad and but they don't mean anything. It's a movie.
We give,
you know, it's just,
like it says, we give an order of reality to the illusions.
yeah, because it's all one thing. We split it up and carve it out and go, this is good and this is bad and this is right for me and this is wrong for me, and like that's a meaning we're putting there which isn't there. It's meaningless. It means nothing. And once you accept that, once you stop projecting a meaning onto the world, then everything in the world starts to sing to you about the oneness and the holiness of God's one Son, and everything is it. Like the whole is in every apparent bit. Like there's no bits, there's no parts, right? It's just one thing. But once you can get past projecting a meaning onto it, that it's good or it's bad or it's right or it's wrong or it should have happened or it shouldn't have happened, once you get past all of that, there is this love that bleeds through the movie, which is quite extraordinary. And that's the full implications of that first miracle principle. Now, our resistance to that is massive. But literally it is saying nothing means anything, you know.
Again, I guess this is the concept thing. Once you take that concept on board and then you throw that concept away from the localized point of consciousness that you think you occupy,
yeah,
then God is in everything I see because God is in my mind. So
yeah,
as you know, that might be a little pack of butter in a
absolutely.
you know,
If there's the first pronoun error is that there's a separate I. There's a me that exists in isolation. And once I you know, accept that there is this I, this isolated separate self, then all the other pronoun errors come into play, which is that there's a you and a he or a she or a them, or an it. But once you remove the I as a separate self, there's just one. There's no more separateness. There's just unity. Yeah, there's just unity.
I
And
think
that's our
that,
challenge.
yeah, that's your, that, you know, there you are. Forgiveness lets me know that minds are joined, because it's cleaning the lens, isn't it? It's not the world. It's not the reality of what actually exists opposed to the unreality of what doesn't exist. It's actually cleaning that lens of how we look at it. And I often
Yeah,
think it's like a jet wash, isn't it? It's like
yeah,
get the
yeah,
forgiveness in there and jet wash all of that
yeah.
interference out of the way that's stopping you seeing. And then, like in the course, when it says, you know, then you will see God in a cup, or you will see God in a pebble, or in a
And you will.
person. Yeah.
And you will. Yeah. It's like Jesus says, yeah, if you could just remove all your own ideas from this table, you would have visions straight away.
Mm,
And when you get glimpses of that, and Jesus says, and it would show you something pure and whole and clean. And when you get those glimpses, it really does.
that's what I was thinking about. You have read it, haven't you? I wasn't sure if it was the Irish charm. Yes, because then the course will say, you know, you'll see the holy face of Christ in everything, and hear in everything no sound except echo of God's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. That's what's there. That's what's there when we get our own meanings out of the way,
Hmm.
our own projections out of the way, because none of it means anything. You know,
So,
there's a part in the course where Jesus is talking about, he laughs at sickness and pain and death. He laughs at like famine and suffering and death, and you know, so that's a bit of a shocking passage if you were just to come across that in the course. And clearly, if I'm identifying as a body, as Keith, and I'm laughing at famine and starvation and suffering and war, I'm a psychopath. So it's not what Jesus is saying, but what he is saying is when you step out of identifying as a body, and you experience yourself as the capital S self, you know that's what everything is, and that's all you see anywhere. So really, there's a movie playing about the crucifixion and death of God's Son, and really, when you step out of being one of the characters in the movie, all you can see is the light of God's Son shining behind everything, behind the famine, behind the death, behind the war. Yeah, so it's really getting to that place.
and then I find that separation, the whole, if you want to, you know, like taking the sting out of this, the idea, the thought of separation, it's that even that you can put like a positive spin on it, because you can say, well, this has enabled me to understand oneness and the relationship with oneness, you know, not a relationship that requires 2 points, but just 1 point. And if there's only 1 point and that's everything, it can't look on something that it's not. So there's nothing to
Yeah.
look at to define. The act of definition becomes redundant in that understanding of oneness.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we're going to continue to see a world of lies, you know, a movie about the impossible, which is separateness and pain and death and crucifixion. So that's going to continue to play. Um, but you know, Jesus is training us so that we don't buy in, we don't treat it like reality.
Hmm.
Again, the miracle looks on devastation and reminds the mind that what it sees is false. So really, what we're training ourselves to do is with Christ's vision to see the holy, invulnerable, loving Son of God shining as the truth behind the fictional horror images that we made.
Mm.
Yeah,
And again, I think, you know, if you were asleep dreaming and you used a character in your dream to try and explain to you what was going on, that character's limited by your understanding. And he's outside the dream going, you're asleep in a chair and he's whispering in your ear, you're dreaming.
indeed.
That's incredibly powerful. And it's something that, you
Yeah,
know, when I go back to discovering the course, you know, it was on the journey of like opening and closing quite a lot of different books on different thought systems, and just the moment that it wasn't all encompassing, and didn't have no opposite. I found, you know, I shut the book and I'd move on. And then when I read the course for the first time, I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. You know, even without being able to articulate it, I knew, or now know, that what I was feeling was a sense that this is from above the battleground. This is from outside of the dream. And I've never found anything in it ever that's maybe going, Lord, you know, and because it meets us where we are. You know, it's funny because I opened it the other day and I got 2 pages in front of me, and I can see I've been through it once and underlined like a paragraph in pencil. Then the next time I must have read it, I had a blue pen with asterisks. Then the third time it was like with a black pen, a load of little hearts next to that and underline. And so this whole double page was completely highlighted in different ways, apart from 2 lines right in the middle. So I had to look at those and I was like, wow. So, you know, it's like, well, I can't underline that. It's just going to underline the whole book, you know. But
Yeah.
you know, that kind of highlights, there's somebody, Bruce Rawls, who I like, he's a big fan of Ken, and he sort of said, you know, it's not like you come back and go, God, who's put that in there? Was that in there last time? You know, all this information
Absolutely.
is in there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
your expansion, it's your mind that's expanded, and then you come back
Yeah.
to it, which is why I think it's so incredible, because it's got this elasticity which grows. It meets you where you are. So, you know, it's a living document. We're a living document. We come back to it with a fresh perception, and we can then see it in a different way, which is kind of like why I've enjoyed carrying on with the workbook for the last few years, because the person who guided me through it the first time, she said to me that, you know, it's like the onion, peeling the onion, that kind of metaphor. You know, every time you take a layer off the onion, you see it differently. And you know, by the time I'd done 365 lessons and come around and effectively did 360 lesson 366, number 1 again, it's like, oh, now you're seeing number 1 with all of those thoughts that have altered the way that you're perceiving the world.
Yeah.
That's spoken to your mind, because you end up with like a storehouse, like an artillery of thoughts to counter the program that we inputted from fear, that was just running and running, and it was just running the show, wasn't it? As
I
Jesus.
think this, yeah, I think there's two dimensions to that. The first is when you understand what's being said on a whole different level, which is extraordinary in and of itself. But I think even more extraordinary is when you read something in the course and go, I have never seen that before. How could that be there? That was not there before. And there's just an example of that in the group there, maybe yesterday. And I read it and I was going, oh my God. I use so many passages from the course to tell people, because you know from the group that I drill Ken's two workbook lessons. The 2 Ken said was, all you need was, I'm never upset for the reason I think, and I can see peace instead of this. And you know, the meaning of I'm never upset for the reason I think is because I'm identifying as an ego, and there's only upset in that. There's only guilt in that. There's only self-loathing in that, and inevitably projection is going to take place where I see my sin out there in other people and I attack them for it. Or I feel like the innocent victim of people. And again, the problem isn't what's happening to my separate self, or what people are doing to my separate self, or whether I'm a happy separate self or I'm not. The only problem is that I'm identifying as a separate self. And that's what that means. I'm never upset for the reason I think. So I've used loads of different quotations from the course to sort of drill that idea into people. And the idea that, yes, you know, there is an insane voice talking to itself in your mind, but it's not you. Which is so important, you know, and you don't have to get rid of it, and you don't have to smother it, and you don't have to, you know, silence it. You just have to stop identifying with it or wanting it to be what you are. And someone just put this quote in the course yesterday, which is, whatever form temptation seems to take, it always but reflects a wish to be a self that you are not. And from that wish, a concept arises teaching that you are the thing you wish to be, which is perfect. That's going to be adopted now as like my number one quotation from the course. I never remember reading that in the course before. So that's what I find most extraordinary, is when you come across something like that so glaring and you go, how could I have missed that?
But that, you know, as a musician, I'll often cite like some of the classic albums that I've listened to for, goodness me, 30, 40 years or something. And again, it's this same principle, you know, I'll listen to it and I'll go, oh my God, listen to the keyboard in the chorus and the backing vocals do that. And it's like, that's been there since it was recorded, you know.
Yeah.
Snuck in last night and swapped my vinyl over, you know, it's always been like that. And what's changed is my capacity to see to that degree, to zoom in to that sort of degree, to pick up on that
Sure.
nano detail.
Yeah.
But, you know, with the whole thing, like it keeps recurring, it's like you zoom into the detail, you conceptualize, you engage with the metaphors, but the long-term plan, the long view, is to bin it all off, is to sack it all off, because the whole act of definition means you are engaging in the wrong practice, really. Because when you're it, you know, so in the course when it says to perceive truth is not the same as to know it, you know, all the time that we think we're a localized point of consciousness looking at something, the best we can do is to cleanse our perception with forgiveness.
Yes.
But
Yes.
until we leave the body, until we leave the body we think we're in, and whatever next we, you know, however those stages pan out, we are as limited as the stage, the rung of the ladder that we're on, really, aren't we?
Yeah, because right up until the real world, there's still a me, there's still a self, there's still a finite mind, if you like, even up until the real world, and it's not until the undoing of consciousness that we return to the knowing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like I say, right up until the real world, there's still perception.
So I think one of the most profound experiences in my top 3 sort of most profound experiences so far was the disappearance of my individual self in my awareness, you know, through an experience where I was so present and I could see the clarity of everything to a degree where, you know, I could almost sense the electromagnetic field of creation underneath the form. But Leon didn't exist, you know. I was just blinking and looking at this experience, and incredibly powerful and incredibly sharp, sort of honed in experience. But it didn't require me. It required me to not be there to see it in that way.
Yeah, it's back to the pronoun era. Once you step out of the pronoun of me as a separate self, then suddenly you're everything.
And that comes
So
to lesson 1 of like, nothing I see. Nothing eyes? What, me? Nothing I see. Off you go, mate, you know. We don't need the eye. That's amazing.
I should probably say, rather than saying you're everything, I should probably say everything is you, because what you are is not defined by the everything, but the everything is you. Yeah.
Nice.
But whilst you're never qualified or changed by any of it. Yeah.
Which is why I like the use of the word holographic in spiritual vocabulary these days, you know, that everything's in the whole and the whole is in everything. Or like Rumi would say, you know, people know that the drop of water's in the ocean, but not everybody susses that the ocean's in the drop of water as well.
Absolutely. And it's one of Jesus's big teaching in the course that, you know, every apparent part contains the whole. In other words, the totality of Christ is in every apparent thing. And that goes for people and animals and plants and stones and grains of sand. The totality of Christ is in everything.
Yeah.
Not a part of Christ, not like a dimension of Christ, but the whole is in every apparent part. And there's no parts. It's the truth of the one Son of God bleeding through the movie of broken pieces.
Amazing.
The
Because
truth of unity. Yeah.
the cinema metaphor is just, it's so good, isn't it? I know for quite a while I've kind of thought, you know, how metaphors and systems, old-fashioned, antiquated sort of models of like the sky daddy, the anthropomorphized God who's up there and he's angry and he's all fire and brimstones, and how off-putting that is to people who could benefit massively from a model that they go, oh, okay, I get it, you know. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, that comes back time and time again with the idea of sitting in the cinema with Jesus, watching something on playback, uninvested, able to see it separately. You know, the whole, when you sort of analyze the component parts of that metaphor, it's like, wow, this is great. This really does help.
Yeah. Yeah, the cinema metaphor, or the above the battleground metaphor, it's quite a difficult one to have people get their heads around, because it's really getting you in touch with the you that's not a body, not a physical body, and not a psychological body. So it's, you know, it's what we are as pure awareness in the Holy Spirit, or as Ken would say, as, you know, the decision maker, as a non-judgmental observer in the Holy Spirit. That's what's in the cinema. So it takes such a long time to drill people that it's not your personality that's in the cinema, it's not your body that's in the cinema, it's not, you know, you as a person that's in the cinema. That's the movie character. That's what's being looked at. But what's in the cinema is a pure awareness, you know, and an absence of concepts. And it's a really helpful, it's really helpful for training us that way. Once we can get past the idea that, you know, there's a me in the cinema with you as a person, as a body, as a psychological self, as a separate self. No. That's the movie you're watching. But that was such a helpful thing for me in the beginning.
Because when you do grasp that, then obviously you can take everything in a new way, can't you? So
it changes everything. It changes everything. And, you know, nobody grasps that in the beginning.
no.
Because I know when in the beginning I had the generalized anxiety disorder, and I had it from the minute I got up in the morning until I went to bed at night, and my leg couldn't sit still for a moment, or it felt like I would explode. I couldn't meditate, or I would actually like physically keep jumping in my seat, and my mind would just race constantly, and circular thoughts, and there wasn't a moment's peace, and insomnia, and all the mess that goes with anxiety. And just from Ken, I learned that process of just being in the cinema with Jesus. And in the beginning, it was me holding the idea that there was a me with Jesus that was not the mess that was going on in my head. That, you know, yes, that's in your wrong mind, but there is a right mind with Jesus that's completely at peace. And I just held that as an idea. I didn't feel that peace. I held it as an idea in the midst of the non-peace. And that's the thing I got from the beginning, was that, you know, it's not Keith that's in the cinema. And that's so hard to teach people. It takes a lot of repetition before someone understands that. But it was really just holding this idea that says, I'm taking this leap of faith. There is a me that's not all this mess that's going on in my head. You know, my thoughts are not my real thoughts. And just by holding that, and just by regularly throughout the day going, yes, I have anxiety, but what does it have to do with the love and peace of the Holy Spirit in my mind? You know, yes, I have, you know, a restless leg, I have anxiety, I have worries about things, but what does that have to do with the me that's in the cinema with Jesus? And I just did that for 4 months, and just that idea of a me that wasn't Keith started to come to life in my mind. It just started to shine. And it's never stopped. And so that's what I say to people: just take that leap of faith. You know, it's really that leap of faith that says you're not what you think you are.
But
in what way?
one of my favorite teachers as well, she said this wonderful thing where she said, faith is not knowing.
Yeah,
And I was like,
yeah.
you know, that's you can twist that round and look at it from all sorts of angles. And I can certainly relate to personally to what you're explaining through my own journey of removing the interference, of being able to get towards the peace inside. And, you know, that freedom that came, first of all, just from hearing, you are not this voice, this isn't you. It's just like, and hearing it in a way that I'd explained to you that I knew when I felt when I felt the words in the course, I was like, this is real, this is true, this isn't from round it. You know, if I hadn't have read that that was received as an inner dictation, I think I'd have maybe felt or sussed that anyway, because it's like, this just feels like it's from outside of the dream. You know, this has got a whole nother level of sparkle to it that I haven't picked up on round here. And initially,
And I think the reason for that, I know the reason for that is because your right mind came into your awareness. You felt the timelessness in your mind. You felt the you that's not a body or an insane voice talking to itself. You know, that peace rises when you read something like that, and that's how you know the truth of it.
yeah, truth has a frequency, something that I like to bandy around. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
you feel it, don't you, whether somebody's being genuine or not.
Yeah, apart from that, I think certainly when you read something in the course, something beautiful, or in many different places, but I think the truth of you starts to shine in your mind, and that's the real, because again, you can only be the truth.
That's amazing. Where do we go from there? I think you might have brought us full circle. You can only be the truth. There's your mic drop moment. So absolute pleasure, honestly. Really love what you do, and yeah, I really love watching the extension of that love go through all of these really eager and keen fellow students who have a huge appetite for how you explain things to people, and that must be because it's got a frequency of truth to it.
Yeah, it is. It's quite beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful to see so many people that are having. I suppose I push people really to understand the course probably from the highest rung of the ladder, in the sense, because that's what Ken did as well. That's why people hate him, is because he teaches from, the top level, in terms of, there's no separate self, and you've got one problem and there's one solution. Your one problem is that you're identifying as a separate self, and the answer is you stop doing that, and there's no problems. and that's not for everyone. So, in terms of people, finding, the way I teach the course inspiring, you could find an equal number of people that hate me as much as they hate Ken. But it's quite beautiful when people come forwards and go, I've actually had that experience of love, or I've had that experience of me as an awareness rather than an insane voice talking to itself in my mind. And I get beautiful private messages and emails all the time like that. It's just, yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely. It makes it all worth it.
It's good to take ownership of that as well, because it's not an ego motivation. It's people need to do more of that. And in our British culture, I know, again, going back to my friends in Holland, I remember learning to speak Dutch to a certain extent, and I asked them something really ordinary, like if I was in the supermarket and saw a fellow shopper and I was looking for a product, what would I say to them if it was like a tin of baked beans? And they just said to me, have you seen the baked beans? And I was like, pardon? It's like, from the Brit. Excuse me, I'm ever so sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to be alive and drawing breath in this same space as you. I don't suppose you've seen, circuitous, convoluted route. Have you seen the baked beans?
Yeah.
And then when I was learning some of the language, they'd say, ik ben very good in France. So it's like, I'm quite good at speaking French. Ik speak natural Dutch, and there was no holding back. Like American people know this as well. It's like, you just say it as if you're good at something, you say, I'm good at something. And as a musician, someone can say to me, that song's lovely. And I can go, I know, it's beautiful, isn't it? Because I don't feel like I've taken ownership. I feel like the song came through me. So I can also be a participant in observing it and going, that song is beautiful, without going, well, of course that song's beautiful, darling, I wrote it, And, so I think it's important that people navigate that between knowing that it's okay to take ownership of something that's beautiful. So it's nice that you feel like you can acknowledge that from these people, because these messages are all real, they're all genuine. People send you a message, whether it's a private message or an email, and pour stuff out from themselves willy-nilly, do they? So it's like, oh, what shall I do with my 10 minutes that I could be sitting here doing this with these people? It's a very conscious decision to use some time to say, I'm going to reach out and let this person know that what they've done has really affected me in a positive way.
Yeah, I'm very touched and inspired by the dedication and the passion of people in the group daily. They inspire me with their passion and dedication for it. It's beautiful.
Brilliant.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
So I'm going to leave us with this little tiny bit of writing here. Dash might have to butt in and psychologically hold the space for us, as he has been doing so. So, Jesus, please be with me in this now moment. You remind me of our shared connection with the true level of consciousness that exists in the mind of God. I dream of exile. You didn't see the dream. I dream of separation. You know the impossible implausibility of such an unfounded thought is not possible. You're awake in my dream. You're the light in the infinite sky. Clouds cannot obscure your light. Day is never followed by night. Doubts and uncertainties need not be concerns for me. I can be of good cheer. You have overcome the world.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Hopefully we could maybe do another one at some point.
Sure, no problem.
Amazing. Thank you, Keith.